3D Workers Island is one of the most fascinating internet horror experiences I've had in a long time. If you haven't heard of it, it's a series of screenshots that tell a story created by Tony Domenico, most famous for being the creator of Petscop, which I will get around to discussing someday. The story of 3D Workers Island mostly focuses on how the people who have downloaded the screensaver react to the things that they are seeing. The screensaver itself shows a small island with a house on it. There are 6 characters on the island, and they appear to have some sort of primitive AI that makes them interact with each other. But hiding below the surface of this retro early internet aesthetic is an unsettling story about obsession, trauma, and abuse. So today I'm going to be going through the entirety of 3D Workers Island and giving my thoughts on the story as we go along, trying to put some of the pieces together. I will put a link to 3D Workers Island in the description, so definitely go check it out if this sounds interesting to you. You may come away with a completely different viewpoint than I did, but I will be showing you guys the entirety of 3D Workers Island and giving my commentary along the way, so even if you have no idea what this thing is, you'll still be able to follow along. I also have to shout out Sagan Hawk's video on this, as it goes into the meta-narrative aspect of the story and how that relates to the wider online horror landscape. And I think he absolutely nails what 3D Workers Island is going for in terms of its commentary on how internet horror is consumed, but I want to take a look at the narrative of the experience itself. Because even though there are things to be learned about the way that we discuss horror, I think the narrative present in this program is incredibly captivating and pretty dang creepy. There will be discussions of child abuse in this video, so if that makes you uncomfortable, then I suggest you watch a different video of mine. None of it is graphic, but it is there and it's pretty present throughout the entire story. If you end up liking this video, then remember to subscribe. I'm trying to reach 100,000 subs by the end of 2025. And also, this video is sponsored by Mantis Sleep. I'm now going to say that again. This video is sponsored by Mantis Sleep. Mantis Sleep makes these sleek, premium, comfortable masks that have honestly been a game changer for me. I do a ton of reading for this channel, and most of the time that I spend reading is in the late night into the early morning. The issue is that my wife is on a completely different schedule to me and has to get up early in the morning. And these sleep masks have been absolutely perfect for us because of this. Now she can wear hers at night when I'm reading in bed next to her, and I wear mine in the morning since the sun rises so early where I'm at. I personally have never once been able to sleep with the sleep mask on. They've always been very irritating and uncomfortable to me, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that I can sleep like a baby with my Mantis sleep mask on. They have these adjustable cups that go over your eyes that not only completely block out any light, but also keep your eyelashes from touching the sleep mask. Combine this with the super comfortable strap that never gets in the way, and you have a sleep mask that almost feels like it's not even there. It's absolutely amazing. Please go check out Mantis Sleep and use my code DAVIS at checkout to get 10% off your order. Again, that's code DAVIS for 10% off your order. They have a nice range of options, including masks with headphones built into them and masks with cooling eye cups to keep your face cool at night. Thanks again to Mantis Sleep for sponsoring this video. Follow the link in the description of this video to get 10% off your sleep mask today. And now, back to the video. But without further ado, let's get into my investigation of 3D Workers Island. Our first screenshots are of the discovery pages for 3D Workers Island, referred to commonly as 3D Whisker, and I'll be calling it that from now on. What is 3D Whisker? 3D Whisker is a freeware screensaver. The full title is 3D Workers Island, but most of us prefer to use its file name instead, pronounced 3D Whisker. In 3D Workers Island, 6 characters interact on a tiny island with complex and unpredictable results. Every session tells a different story of the island. Many have found it to be compelling on levels both technical and emotional. T2's Top Software gave it a 10 out of 10 score and wrote about its characters. You will find yourself relating to them and understanding them. They may even confound you and anger you at times. The original source of the program is unknown. It was discovered at 3D Screensaver's Palace, one of many aggregates of screensaver programs appropriated from sources across the internet. The owner of that website, by his own admission, sourced it from a similar screensaver aggregate and could not recall which one. It has not been found. See the history page for a history of 3D Whisker's discovery and spread, as well as the development of this website. We recommend trying 3D Whisker yourself by downloading it from the download page. The events that occur in 3D Whisker are not scripted. They unfold dynamically and every session is different, which means you are guaranteed to see things that none of us have seen before. If you discover anything interesting or important that has not been recorded here or discussed in the forum, feel free to send us an email or create a thread on the forum asking about it, but please do not treat this as a place for tall tales. Check out the overview page for a more detailed introduction. 3D Whisker Discovery Pages was created by me, Pat Lawler, or P. Lawler, and the technical side is largely run by Singer. See further info on the contact page. Something already seems off here. For one, it's a little strange that this Discovery Pages website even exists. It seems that there really are a group of people who are really into 3D Whisker. We are also told that the characters on this island might confound and anger us at times. From the jump, it seems like this website treats them as something more than just fictional characters. We learn that the page is run by both P. Lawler and Singer, and P. Lawler invites us to join in on the discussion, but tells us to not treat this as a place for tall tales. It's fascinating that we are told that anything can happen on this island, but we are also warned to not discuss anything too far-fetched. There's some mixed signals being sent here. The next screenshot is the installation instructions, with the next several images showing the process of the file being downloaded. The README text tells us yet again that 3D Whisker is an experimental 3D simulation screensaver for PCs with advanced worker simulation. The end of the README has that signature brand of strange writing that made Petscop so unique and eerie to me. Something about the way that this is phrased is creepy to me. Workers are an approach to computation. 3D Workers Island takes advantage of resources in the world. Welcome to the world in the computer. This technology. We are shown more of the installation process before getting this sort of title card. We are then introduced to our characters: Pat, Rebecca, Joe, Amber, Holland, and Grace. Notice that all of the characters are facing the same direction, except Grace. She appears to have her back turned towards us. It's hard to tell exactly, but her feet give her position away. This already makes me think that Grace is being shunned somehow or stands out in some other way. Everyone else seems to be in harmony, but she looks away from us. We are then shown the island that this simulation takes place on. The geometry is very basic, with just a house, some trees, a picnic table, and a few flowers. Our first sequence of the simulation sees Joe exit the house with a watering can. He waters the flowers before being joined by Amber, who appears to talk to him. Before we can move any further, however, we are met with this black screen with the word world written on it. A little strange, but whatever. On to the discovery boards. Hey, I just want to say that this thing is so cool. My eyes are glued to it. I'm mesmerized. I just want to keep it on all day and see what the people are up to. But my brother needs the computer for his work. What do you all think, and what's happening on your island today? Yeah, it's a hidden gem of the internet. It kills that Johnny Castaway thing my uncle thinks is so good. This is better because the people are like real people you're watching, and you never know what's going to happen next. I've seen dancing and squirming, the baffling games they play with objects, the awkward intimacy that looks like hugging sometimes and other times looks, pornographic, frankly. Agreed. Holland just put her face inside a tree. So far, it seems like these users have seen some more interesting things than we have. We are told about dancing and squirming and intimacy, nothing we've noticed so far. There isn't much else to gather here other than the fact that this strange screensaver seems to have a really devoted online following, which is a little odd to be sure. Our next scene shows us what looks like a barbecue. We have Rebecca cooking up some hamburgers for the rest of the people on the island that sit and eat. Holland has what looks like a doll in her hands and plays with it near the water, laying on her back before Pat and Amber join her. Notably, throughout this entire scene, Grace is off on her own, just swaying back and forth, no one paying attention to her. The way her model is designed is really interesting to me. Because of the hairline, you'd think that she was facing us, but again, the direction of her feet shows that she is looking away. I also find it interesting that this is referred to as 3D Workers Island, when 3 of the workers are children who shouldn't be working by default. Another moment that catches my eye is this frame when Rebecca gives the hamburger to Holland. It almost looks like Pat is pointing to something out of frame. We can see that both she and Amber turn to look at something we can't see, and this is the only time that we see her hand like this. But there could also be a darker implication here. Maybe I'm crazy, but there is something about Pat's model that almost looks angry? I don't know what it is about it, but there's something sinister that I can't help but see. And I'll admit, this reading is tainted by what I know about the story going forward, but I believe that this is our first look at Pat's abuse of Amber, her child. While it might look like she's pointing off to the sea, it could also be read as her hitting Amber across the face. Let me show that sequence to you guys again. Also, keep in mind how Rebecca comes over to give Holland a burger while this is happening. It's almost like she is distracting her from what is going on with Amber and Pat. And like always, Grace is facing away, unwilling to engage with the world around here. No one acknowledges the abuse, they just pretend it isn't even happening. This is going to become a major theme of the story going forward. My suggestion is that Pat, the mother of Amber and Holland, is an abusive parent who takes her anger out on Amber. We'll see this more explicitly going forward, but it's kind of hard to get this out of your mind once the idea has been planted. Moving on. Our next screenshots are more of the discovery boards. I think it's great, but it's buggy and just weird. My roommate keeps talking about how he could do it better. I'd like to see him try. He couldn't even program the turret in our tank game last semester. What an idiot. My mom hates TV, but she tells me to put on the virtual people. I put 3D Whisker on the projector, and she squints quietly in a recliner for hours. Peace for me. I like to keep it running in an alcove of my house and check up on it as I'm passing through. It's good for that. It can surprise you sometimes. The other day, I saw Joe take a remote-controlled helicopter out of the house and fly it around. I'd never seen that before. I keep hearing the stories about this thing, but so far, it's boring. I don't get it. I want to know what you guys are doing because I'm just starting up the program and watching it and nothing is happening. The people are standing around, sitting around, looking around, walking around. They don't have faces, so I don't know what they're feeling or thinking. I don't know. What's going on here, guys? Which characters are you talking about? You know, some people have worked hard enough in their lives and deserve a rest already. No, but seriously, what do you mean? I see plenty of activity on the island. I do feel a twinge of annoyance when I see a character like Amber sitting around. I want to tell her, hey, you're young, do something. Actually, it does become entertaining over time. You just have to keep watching. I think you'll be surprised by what you see, but you have to kind of be open to it. You have to be cool. Be cool and things will be shown to you. Personally, I love the screensaver. It's so messed up. So a couple of important things here. The first that we'll talk about is the last message saying that if you're patient, things will be shown to you, messed up things. This is our first explicit hint that this screensaver is hiding something more sinister. It appears that there is a contingent of fans who really only watch it to see the scarier elements of it. We also need to take a look at P. Lawler's message, which reveals a lot about her character. Notably, she says that some people have worked enough in their lives. This will all come back later. We also have our annoyance towards Amber for apparently sitting around. This annoyance seems to go a layer deeper than trivial frustration, and it's kind of uncomfortable to read. Our next sequence on the island is interesting. We see Joe reading a book on the picnic bench. Grace sits next to him, facing away from everybody else. We see a stand mixer near the house and what looks like another book on the ground. Pat walks around, appears to look around, and then heads back towards the house. Rebecca comes out and appears to wave to her, and that's where the scene ends. My reading of this scene is that Pat is upset that the area outside of the house is messy. Despite this, she doesn't pick up any of the objects herself, but heads back to the house. I think she is going to get Amber to clean up outside and potentially punish her for letting things get so messy. She is distracted by Rebecca, however, and the scene changes. Again, for a screensaver called 3D Workers Island, we don't really see Pat doing any work. Maybe she agrees with what P. Lawler said. Some people have worked enough in their lives. Next up, we get the site that 3D Whisker is downloaded from. There is a screensaver with colorful shapes that may come back later and a cave simulation game on the website. But 3D Workers Island has by far the most amount of downloads. Its description simply reads, an island with people walking around on it. This immediately reminded of the Adult Swim short horror experience, This House Has People in It, and while I doubt it was intentional, that connection feels fitting to me. This House Has People in It is a nightmarish fever dream of a short where we see a family dealing with some strange problems, notably that their daughter is sinking into the ground. If you haven't seen it, then I would highly recommend checking out the original video and Nightmind's explanation video. It's a really cool project and I won't spoil what happens. All I will say is that the title, This House Has People in It, seems to allude to the idea that while there is a family inside the house, it's not a home. There's nothing comforting about it. Likewise, while this island has a house that could be considered a home, we know that the abuse Amber suffers prevents it from being a place of refuge. Combine that with the fact that Amber is literally on an island with absolutely no way of escaping, and the situation starts to seem more bleak than ever before. Going back to This House Has People on It, it wouldn't surprise me if Tony Domenico has taken some inspiration from that short and the shorts that came before it on Adult Swim. All these projects have this similar brand of cryptic storytelling hiding a really disturbing story, which is something that Tony Domenico does so well. Although I wouldn't say that This House Has People in It would be a direct inspiration, because I do think that came out after Petscop was first released. I think Petscop's pretty old. But anyways, our next island sequence shows us Amber mowing the lawn while Rebecca sits in the picnic bench. Yet again, Amber is doing all of the work while the adults sit back. Next, we have the overview of 3D Whisker. What is the strange screensaver you have stumbled upon? The only way to really understand 3D Whisker is to try it. It works best without words, but I'll give you my best overview. When you start 3D Workers Island, it will display its 6 characters and a helpful character card that gives you a name for each one. Afterwards, you will be placed in front of an island, and you will mostly remain on that island until you decide to stop the program. The characters are powered by a kind of AI technology that the authors refer to as worker simulation. It is clear from simple observation that this tech should not be taken lightly, but just how advanced this AI is seems to be an ambiguous and controversial question in the community. It is very much a matter of intuition at this point. At the very least, it is good enough to capture the imaginations of many. Whatever is happening under the hood, it is taxing to any PC. The program seems to be fluid in this way. It will use whatever resources are provided to it, but can make do with just about any system that is capable of displaying the 3D graphics. Impressive or not as technology, you will find that this is a program of broad and infinite possibilities. Since retiring last November, I have been keeping 3D Whisker running on the desk in my study, in my bedroom, my living room, my kitchen, and my basement, all running around the clock as I do my household tasks and live my life. What I see on each of these PCs throughout the day is still continuously fresh and novel to me. It makes my home into a very pleasant little world. You will notice that the island is quiet. 3D Whisker does not play audio, unlike what you may find in the After Dark products and similar entertainment-based programs, but very much is in line with the default package of screensavers in the Windows operating system, such as 3D Maze and Mystify Your Mind. The significance of this is considerable. It allows the island to disappear. Despite its heft, it's also light. There is a sense of ghostly transience, that none of it is really happening, and it can all vanish with the flick of a mouse. This section appears to have been written by P. Lawler. Notice her obsession with the program, leaving it running on several screens at all times. Also, she mentions that she is recently retired. The complexity of the AI in this simulation is something that seems to be hotly debated. Given the story takes place in 1999, it's fair to say that 3D Whisker was ahead of its time. The last sentence is one that will become important later on, which says, "There is a sense of ghostly transience, that none of it is really happening and it can all vanish with the flick of a mouse." Our next scene is another one that requires quite a bit of interpretation, like this whole story does really, and I'm not saying that my interpretation is correct, it's just what makes the most sense to me. We see Amber and Holland sitting on the shore. Amber appears to look around, potentially past the side of the house, showing her arms to Holland, who then runs away. I see this as Amber telling Holland about the abuse that she has suffered. She looks around to make sure Pat can't see or hear them, then shows some of the evidence of the abuse. That could be the reason that she shows her arm. The other reason that makes sense is that she's pointing to the side of the house where Pat potentially abuses her. It seems like Amber telling Holland this makes her uncomfortable. She doesn't seem to be suffering the same abuse and potentially runs off to tell Pat about this. This just reinforces yet again how alone Amber is in dealing with this. No one is coming to save her. No one will listen to what she has to say. Next, we have more of the discussion boards. Here's what they say. "This is my son's island project for first grade, which took second place in the contest. I'm proud of him. Okay, I will admit, he mostly played Pajama Sam while Mom and I built the island, but he did the written part of the assignment himself. Anyway, here are the photos. That's adorable. Glad your son's school is teaching him about islands. Your living room is disgusting. Lol. P. Lawler. You did a good job with the island. I have some advice. You should not do your son's work for him. Don't let him get used to the idea that you will do his assignments. Take it from a fellow parent." Thanks, appreciated, but they were expecting parents to help with this one. You should see what the other kids brought in. Anyway, he did the written part, as I said. My son doesn't like 3D Workers Island one bit. It scares him and he makes me turn it off. Kids are afraid of everything. My wife and I rented a tape of the Page Master to watch with her niece, and unfortunately we got to the moment where Macaulay Culkin is in the library and gets overtaken and drowned in rivers of paint, and suddenly the tape went nuts and became unreadable. Her niece started screaming. Now she's afraid of getting drowned in paint and turning into a cartoon. I don't blame the people who made that movie for making a terrifying Macaulay Culkin character get drowned in paint, but some kids really do think it's possible to get swallowed up in a cartoon prison where they can't escape, and heck, if I believed that, I'd be afraid too. P. Lawler seems awfully concerned with kids making sure that they get their work done. Again, it doesn't seem like a normal obsession, it's uncomfortable. We also have a kid who is scared of 3D Whisker. Maybe he has seen some of the messed up stuff that the earlier user hinted towards and doesn't like seeing it at all anymore. I remember my older brother showing me the classic Scary Maze flash game where you get jump scared by Reagan from The Exorcist when I was little. And after that, even seeing the initial maze was enough to really freak me out. Even though there was nothing apparently scary about it, that association was enough to terrify me. Maybe this is what's going on with the kid who is afraid of 3D Whisker. Maybe they saw something that their parent hasn't seen and are afraid that they'll see it again. We're also told about a scene from Page Master where Macaulay Culkin is sucked into a cartoon. There is some meta relevance with this that Sagan Hawks talks about in his video, but nothing really important right now that we'll talk about in this video, although it might come up a little bit later. Moving on. Our next island scene is the most disturbing one so far. We see what appears to be Pat abusing Amber. She pushes her to the ground and towers over her. This is why I think that Amber pointed in this direction while talking to Holland. She was trying to show her where the abuse takes place when everyone else is inside. This could very well be the aftermath of Amber trying to alert Holland, Holland telling Pat about what she said, and Pat retaliating with even more abuse. Our next look at the discussion boards is maybe the most confusing look yet, but has a lot of really interesting information under the surface. Good kid. I installed 3D Whisker on my school's computers. This happened back in October. In detention, they had me sit in the computer lab where I was ostensibly not allowed to play on the computers. Lol. But my computer lab teacher was in there upgrading Office, and I showed him 3D Whisker and explained it to him. I swear he was like enchanted by it. He wanted to install it on all the computers, so we installed it on all the computers together while eating donut holes. We had some problems, and I had to call my sweet angelic mommy to tell her why I was still at school, but we eventually got it working after 7 p.m. We turned off the lights and started going on every computer in the room. It was a powerful experience. Just all these different things happening on the island all around us, on glowing screens, in the dark and silent computer lab at night. Way better than 3D pipes. It felt like this was the way 3D Whisker was meant to be experienced. I recommend putting this thing on as many screens as you possibly can. Forgive me, I don't know anything. I'm just a 14-year-old teenaged kid. What were you in detention for? Lol, dress code violations mainly. I also invented a fake skin disease called kudalakune and started incorporating it into some of my written assignments in English and history, even though it had nothing to do with anything. Okay, I'll bite. Tell me about kudalakune. I'm glad you asked. Kudalakune. Skin disease with 4 stages. Stage 0, redness and sensitivity. Stage 1, skin gaps. Holes or gaps of various sizes exposing dermis. Stage 2, skin islands. Widespread loss of epidermis, leaving only a number of skin islands of various sizes. Stage 3, recession of the islands, leading to complete loss of epidermis. Early stages can be treated and reversed, but stage 3 is irreversible. Stages 1, 2, and 3 are constantly rated 10 on the 1 to 10 pain scale. Screaming and hair pulling and despair. Okay, so this user Good Kid, who has since been banned, tells us that they were in detention and got their teacher to put 3D Whisker on every computer in the computer lab. They were in detention due to dress code violations and making up a strange disease called kudalakune, which is actually a reference to an earlier Tony Domenico project. It's a short story called Good Sky that I will actually be reading later on in this video, as I think it hints to who Good Kid is and why it is significant that they made up that disease. Also, I know that I keep saying that I'll discuss a lot of things later on in this video. There is just one reveal coming up that really makes this story come together in my opinion, and I want to get to that before I start diving into my crackpot theories about what the story might actually mean. Our next scene shows Amber wheeling a wheelbarrow with what looks like several red balls in it. She brings them to the shore and appears to look around for a minute. Holland appears to be playing, and it looks like she picks up and drops a rock. To me, it looks like she cries out in pain afterwards, like she's trying to get some sympathy from Pat. Pat looks at her for a second before turning her attention back to Amber yet again. While you might be tempted to think that Pat loves Holland and hates Amber, she doesn't seem to really care for either of them. Holland might cry out in pain, but Pat can't be bothered to do anything about it. The only presence she seems to have in her children's lives is to play the role of the tormentor to Amber. Next up, we have more discussion boards. Who's your favorite character? Amber. No question, Amber. Amber's the answer. If I had to choose a favorite, tough one. JK's Amber, F everyone else. I'm offended that this question is even being posed, but I understand you don't know any better. You're better off this way. I know we're not supposed to talk about those topics here, but can we at least be honest when it comes to questions like this? I'm not going to pretend my favorite character is Holland or Grace or somebody else just so things can stay clean on this forum. Can somebody fill me in on the joke here? What's wrong with the other characters? This section is odd. Everyone on the forum seems to be obsessed with Amber, even though she hasn't really done anything spectacular that we've seen. I believe this hints towards the screensaver having a paranormal aspect to it. We know that it compels people to watch it, and now we're seeing that it compels people to love Amber. Interesting. What comes next is one of the most important moments of this entire story. It's a comment from P. Lawler. Amber would be a good choice, and may have been mine, but I am sometimes put off by your lazy tendencies. Naturally, I would choose Pat, since by coincidence we share a name, and I believe the 2 children are hers. Another coincidence is I also have 2 daughters. However, I cannot help but feel attracted to Rebecca, with her eye-catching red hair and shoes. It is a difficult question. So some of you may have already guessed this, but I am almost certain that P. Lawler is Pat from 3D Workers Island. They have the same name, they both have 2 kids, we'll see later on that they are both interested in Rebecca, and listen to how she talks about Amber. She says that she has lazy tendencies, and earlier she chastised her for not doing enough. She also gets mad at someone for doing their kids' homework. Pat is the only person on the forum who seems to dislike Amber. It's because she's Amber's abuser. Her running this forum and her obsession with 3D Whisker is a way for her to relive this abuse. This is the revelation that kind of blew the whole story open for me. We aren't looking at some people's discussion on some detached, unrelated forum. We are seeing the perspective of some of those who are involved with the abuse. I mean, if all that wasn't reason enough to believe that Pat is P. Lawler, look at her profile picture. It's literally Pat. Going forward, I will refer to P. Lawler as Pat, and I also believe there are a few other characters from the screensaver present in the story. We'll get to all of them later. Our next scene is honestly one that I have no idea what to make of. Holland walks out, stands next to Amber, looks in the water, then heads back inside. Amber then looks in the water as well. It also almost looks like there is something that Holland has sticking out of the back of her waistband, like she is secretly carrying something, but it's really hard to make out. It almost looks like Holland throws her little toy away, leaving Amber to search for it, maybe because she wants some comfort, or maybe because she knows that she'll be blamed for it going missing. And Grace, like always, is facing away from them. There isn't much more I can make sense of here, so let's move on to the next section, a GeoCities page called Computer Philosophy 1 Windows. There are windows everywhere we see them, and anyone could be looking in at you. That's part of what makes them scary. But windows are even scarier when you're the one who looks in them, because of when you never know what you'll see in them. Remember the enthusiasm in a market for a window into reality in 1996 as the Nintendo 64 broke once lore project reality. Of course, the TV screen is really a window into fiction and not reality. The only real window of reality is the one we looked into as a baby and still cannot turn from. What is called a common story theme of falling into asphalt imagery, we bring the inside into the outside, and the outside is the place we are stuck looking. This is the only meaning of I'm trapped in the TV, when we find out that reality is the thing we look into. But what does that mean? Where are we? What happens when something bad you find responsible for is there, and you do nothing to stop it, because it looks through a window and is not real? I'm trapped in here and I may never return home. What do we mean? So did that make any sense to any of you guys? No? Me neither. Let's talk about it some more. I'm going to reread each portion and try to make some sense of it, going by some of the theories that I have in my head regarding Pat, Amber, and the rest of the people on the island. But windows are even scarier when you're the one who looks in them, because of when you never know what you'll see in them. So I think all of this talk about windows is referring to 3D Whisker itself. We are looking through a window into the lives that those characters are living. The author says that being on the other side of the window is scary because you don't know who is looking in on you, but looking in is even scarier because you don't know what you'll see. This is going to sound kind of crazy and like it's coming from nowhere, because it kind of is, but I believe that Holland is the one who wrote this page. Holland is the person speaking to us. Not the simulation Holland, but the real life Holland, the Holland that is actually Pat's daughter. I think she is trying to convey her guilt and trauma associated with Amber's mistreatment. She has discovered 3D Whisker and is now looking into a window at Amber's abuse. This scares her and she doesn't know what she might see. Holland was most likely told by Amber about her abuse, but she was too young and trusting of Pat to do anything about it. That was when she was on the inside of the window. Back then, her fears were that someone from the outside world would see what was going on and potentially get Pat in trouble or take Amber away from them. That was her fear. Now, she is much more afraid of looking into the window that is 3D Whisker and witnessing the extent of the abuse that she is now able to understand and process. That is why she finds looking inside to be a far scarier experience. She sees that her complacency led to the suffering of her sister. Now, obviously, this isn't actually true. It's not like Holland is responsible for the abuse. This is just what she is probably thinking about herself. Remember the enthusiasm in a market for window into reality in 1976 as the Nintendo 64 broke once lore project reality. Looking up window into reality Nintendo 64 doesn't come up with anything. In fact, that phrase seems to be pretty unique to this project. In my mind, this could be Holland confusing the Nintendo 64 with a different window into reality that first appeared in 1996, 3D Workers Island. As far as we know, the earliest mention of 3D Whisker is on the website that it is downloaded from, and that site has the publication date of December 1997. But we know that the owner of that site found the screensaver from a different screensaver aggregate, so it obviously existed before then, and I believe it was created in 1996. This Freudian slip could be Holland accidentally referring to 3D Whisker as a window into reality. A window into the reality that she and Amber experienced. Of course, the TV screen is really a window into fiction and not reality. The only real window of reality is the one we looked into as a baby and still cannot turn from. Holland is depicted as being very, very young in 3D Whisker. In a sense, 3D Whisker is the window that she looked into as a baby and can no longer turn away from. It's always there. If she is still living with Pat, then it is very likely that she literally cannot turn away from 3D Whisker, as Pat keeps it on as many screens as she can all the time. What called the common story theme of falling into asphalt imagery, we bring the inside into the outside, and the outside is the place we are stuck looking. This falling into asphalt imagery brings to mind the idea of being stuck and unable to move freely, like being stranded on an island, unable to escape your abusers. I also think that falling into asphalt could be an excuse given by an abuse victim to those around them to explain the injuries that they have on their bodies. Bringing the inside into the outside is something that we will see later, but might also hint to Holland's stress as the private abuse suffered by Amber couldn't be kept a secret anymore. This is the only meaning of I'm trapped in the TV, when we find out that reality is the thing we look into. But what does that mean? Where are we? Holland now accepts that the thing that she looks into is reality. She realizes that the world that she lives in, the fallout and covering up of Amber's abuse, is no longer reality, it's a farce. What happens when something bad you find responsible for is there, and you do nothing to stop it, because it looks through a window and is not real? This is pretty simple, all things considered. Holland talks about her guilt for not protecting Amber. It seems she compartmentalized the abuse, and they saw it as not real. I'm trapped in here and I may never return home. What do we mean? Holland's use of we here is really interesting. My guess is that she sees herself as two people, real-life Holland and 3D Whisker Holland. This quote could potentially be something that Holland heard while watching 3D Whisker. Maybe the simulation version of herself told her this, or maybe it was Amber. Amber could be missing from Holland's life currently. The 3D Whisker version of herself talks to Holland, telling her that she may never return home, unwilling to accept that she will, in fact, never be with Holland again. Lastly, we get 3 images of 2 objects in a computer. The first shows them as 2D images, the second is 3D, and the third is 3D images outside of the computer. I consider this to be a representation of how we might view this entire 3D Whisker project. At first, it is just lifeless characters on the screen, just 2D creatures playing their parts. Then, we start to think that those figures might actually be feeling things, they could actually be suffering. We feel a need to try to save the 3D Whisker version of Amber. Then, with the revelation that P. Lawler is Pat who exists in the real world, we realize that these characters also exist outside the screen. They are real people who suffered real tragedies. For reasons that will become clear later, I believe the red ball specifically represents Amber, and I'm assuming the green cone is Holland, although there isn't that much evidence to back this up. That brings us to the end of this major section of the story. As a recap, Amber, Pat, Joe, Holland, Grace, and Rebecca are all real people that are represented inside 3D Whisker. Amber suffered horrific abuse by her mother, Pat, who now runs the 3D Whisker discovery pages. People are drawn into and grow obsessed with 3D Whisker, with all of them claiming that Amber is their favorite character. There have been mentions of a darker side to the Screensaver, but Pat refuses to talk about it. Let's move on to the next section, titled Island. We start with an instant message chat. Wow, tell me more about that. So I was with my cousin last week for Thanksgiving. Since last year, they live a 3 hours drive away. It got late and he took me down a dark trail and scared the piss out of me talking about ghosts and murderers. In a quiet moment, I thought I might change the subject, so I started talking about 3D Whisker apropos of nothing. Turns out he knew about it, which caught me off guard. Whoa. And he carried on with the exact same tone as when he was talking about the torture killers a moment earlier, but now talking about 3D Whisker. As if telling me about a conspiracy or something, he went on about the girl in the pink shirt and gave me this long list of ominous things to pay attention to in the Screensaver. Oh, he's one of those Amber heads. Those people basically took down the old Discovery Pages website a couple years ago. Ruined a good thing. Yeah? Anyway, when we got back, we watched 3D Whisker together until 2 a.m. on the slowest, crappiest computer in the world. We watched until suddenly the computer froze completely. But he told me it wasn't really frozen, that actually 3D Whisker does that on purpose in order to hide things that are happening. I don't know. He was making things up on the spot, but I think they still meant something to him. This chat is a really great way to start this next chapter. It introduces us to the idea that there are things that the Screensaver keeps hidden from certain people, disturbing things. I don't know if this is all that important, but Miss Toothpaste doesn't write like a child to me. She sounds like an adult, and notice how she uses the phrase, apropos of nothing. I have a weird theory that this could maybe be Pat trying to find out more about the disturbing things people have seen, but it could just be a random conversation. She ends with, he was making things up on the spot, but I think they still meant something to him. Maybe this is Pat realizing that there really might be something hidden in 3D Whisker. It's not super important, but I just thought it was an interesting way to read that conversation. More on this later, and onto the discovery boards. Okay, so I almost don't want to ask this at all, but I keep hearing certain implications about this Screensaver that I don't want to repeat here, but you probably know what I'm talking about. I think maybe it's supposed to be a joke, but if so, I don't find it funny at all. Can someone give me some more info about this? Turn back now, don't go any further. Stop. For your own peace of mind, stop this line of inquiry now and do something else. Don't become another one of us freaks. Seriously, I wish I could go back to enjoying this Screensaver normally. I want to be a normal person. Please, let me forget. There are links that can be provided if you really want them. I can send them to your email. Just let me know. I'm no coward. Here's the link. P. Lawler note. Link removed. Go ahead. Enjoy. Yeah, that's not going to last very long. So here again, we have mention of these disturbing encounters. Notice that the link to this website has been removed by Pat. She's trying to control the narrative yet again. Our next scene is really strange. We have Holland carrying a lamp from the inside of the house to the outside of the house, and we also see Grace and Joe staring at each other. Joe's chair looks like it is either in the water or is floating above it. One of the more common readings of this scene is that Joe is trying to get back into Grace's life. There is a theory that Grace is Joe's daughter and he's trying to win his way back into her heart, but she doesn't seem to accept him, and I think this is a pretty valid interpretation. Why Holland is carrying the lamp out of the house, I truly have no idea. It could be a busy work task he was given by Pat to get Amber alone with her and Rebecca. Another possibility is that we're actually seeing something that is going on inside the house. Holland said something about bringing the inside into the outside. Could this be what's going on? Maybe Joe isn't sitting in the ocean, he's sitting in a chair inside the house that we can't see. Maybe Holland isn't bringing the lamp outside, she's simply moving it around inside. Moving on. Our next set of screenshots is the introduction page to the Inside 3D Whisker website. The windows of my living room, covering the walls with wide views of my front and backyards, fill the room with light during the day and an air of vulnerability during the night. My brother crashes here. He sleeps on the couch against the back windows. Sometimes we sit together, looking out those windows, and tell stories about the house beyond my backyard. A man lives in that house with his 2 sons. The curtains are closed, and we imagine our own childhood replaying itself behind them. It's just a stupid game, really, making up stories about the neighbor. I think of it as a way to bond over past experiences. Somehow we get emotional about it anyway, but not emotional enough to do anything, because of course it's a stupid game. There's no point in worrying about those children based on feelings and intuition alone. Still, we both find that our dreams become more vivid with time. Lately we've grown exhausted of that game, but recently I downloaded 3D Workers Island. It plays on a PC in the corner of my living room. You should check out this program. It's a screensaver, which means it only starts when you aren't using the computer, but when it starts, you're on an island. There are people around, but they don't do much, not when they're outside anyway. Naturally, you wonder what they might be doing inside the windowless red house in the background. That's when things start to go wrong, when you start wondering that. And now we begin another game. As in life, concern begets more concern. The reality is always worse than you think it is. No matter how much you learn, it's always worse. And the only escape is to stop asking, to stop digging, to stop learning. This is your chance to stop. The preferred resource for all things 3D Workers Island is called 3D Whisker Discovery Pages. Created and maintained by Pat Lawler, it covers everything a reasonable person would want to know. You should browse her website first, if you haven't already, because it's quite good. But Pat Lawler doesn't see what we see, or chooses not to. I've created a different kind of resource. Here, I take your sightings and I display them for the benefit of others. Together we play this game the way it is meant to be played. Welcome to my website, Inside 3D Whisker. Beyond here are themes of violent abuse and torture. Continue if you can handle that. So this page is another really confusing one, mostly because we don't know who's writing it. I wanted to connect it to someone from 3D Whisker, but we don't know anyone with a brother. I find it really interesting that the creator of Inside 3D Whisker refers to it as a game. It's really just a screensaver, but maybe imagining what's going on inside the house is a game in and of itself. We were told that there were themes of violent abuse and torture. There won't be anything explicit going forward, just hints of something darker, as is always the case with 3D Whisker. Our next scene is a simple one. Holland, Amber, and Joe sit at a picnic table. Amber faces away from Holland, and it appears the two aren't on good terms. Joe gets up and walks around a little. You get the sense that these three might be killing time. Joe almost seems to be uncomfortable around the two girls. I believe that Joe knows about the abuse, but he isn't doing anything to stop it. That's why he's uncomfortable sitting next to them. He knows he should do something, but he won't for some reason. Next, we get more of the discovery boards. Here's what they say. P. Lawler, I removed your link because it breaks the following rule. Rule 5, do not post links to the website, you know the one. It is nothing more than a collection of perverted creative writing prompts. I would not usually be so strict about something like this, but clearly there are too many people who cannot stay reasonable and sane while discussing the content of this particular website, so I must make the hard decision of banning it. You can guess what I think about this topic, but let me try to explain the phenomenon occurring here. The fact is, many internet users are children and young adults, and children like to play games. What this means is, you will occasionally find yourself unknowingly pulled into the games played by children. On the website, you will primarily find stories told by kids to scare other kids. You will also find so-called analysis of these stories that treats them as true fact to give them legitimacy, but there is no evidence to be found there. I hope I've cleared things up for you, buddy. Shut up, Pat. Anyway, more links. Good info about John Sorroway, Stories of Reality. Thank you, P. Lawler. Well said. Those violent stories are cheesy and over the top. Blood and guts, believe me. I've been watching this program for so long. I would have seen such things by now. If the screensaver won't open up to you, maybe you need to look within yourself to find the problem. You'd love to think it's all just bloody screaming children. Long before I began seeing the violent stuff, I saw the way Amber was treated by the other islanders. I saw her tiredness, I saw her subtle messages, but you just point at the bleeding children and laugh. All right then. Why is it always Amber who gets abused and killed in these made-up scenarios? I don't get why this community has an obsession with torturing her specifically. You're all freaks and sociopaths is my best guess. P. Lawler. Maybe I should create my own section for dealing with 3D Whisker hoaxes. Snopes.com is a good system for these. I would give every one of these stories the red sphere of falseness. False, false, false. Good question. People have a strange amount of concern for Amber. It's a mystery to me. That website. The pictures and screenshots on there are insane. Some of them are obviously straight out of Photoshop, others I don't know. They're all low-quality JPEGs for what it's worth. Makes it easy to hide flaws. Okay, so both Pat and Singer really don't want people to talk about that other website. Pat insists it's all made up, and other users say that maybe the screensaver hasn't opened up to her. Pat wanting to hide the evidence of her abuse makes sense, but it's interesting that Singer seems so interested in hiding it as well. I believe this is because Singer is Rebecca. There isn't a ton to go off of, but we will see later that Rebecca and Pat seem to have a close relationship. Both of them managing this website together would make sense. Another interesting bit is when Pat brings up the Snopes rating system and specifically mentions the red sphere of falseness. I think her desire to associate red spheres with lies is important. Again, it's something we'll discuss later, but notice how Pat and Singer both seem to think that all of the creepy stories of abuse about Amber means that they must be false. It's a classic tactic to manipulate the people around you from an abuser. If Pat is such a terrible mother, why hasn't Holland talked about the abuse? Why is it only Amber that brings it up? Even now, Rebecca and Pat attempt to discredit Amber at every turn, decrying every single show of concern for her as nothing but a false story made up to scare people on the internet. Our next scene is a close-up of Holland walking into a wall. I'm not entirely sure what this means. This could be another instance of the inside being on the outside. These movements could correspond to Holland's movements indoors, but for some reason the screensaver is glitching out and we're unable to see the inside of the house. Out of all the things we've seen in this story so far, this is the thing that I really have no good connections for, so if you have anything about this, put it in the comments below. Our next section is the first look at the Inside 3D Whisker website. Notice the categories on the site being hidden messages, photographs, screams, whispers, glitches, oddities, real life, and just for fun. The real life section is the one that interests me the most. To me, this hints that there are things in 3D Whisker that are analogous to real life events, something that I theorized earlier. Her website should be your source of general information about the screensaver, but come back here when you're done. Pick a category on the left and browse our collection of user-submitted sightings. Download 3D Whisker and let us know what you find by submitting a sighting. Thanks for visiting and telling us your stories. Recent updates. I'm receiving so many emails about the Sam Ferrero business. Though there's not much contention on whether the screenshot of Amber's rare black shirt is real, there's a lot of disagreement on whether the picture on her shirt is really of Sam Ferrero, since it doesn't exactly match any of the known publicly released photos of him. I've expanded the section to include some of your comments. On the subject of photos, I've removed a user-submitted photo from PJR Pin at the request of its original owner. Added a link to Grace's Guilt. Great quote. Lucky for that girl, her story became an urban legend. Most people don't believe it really happened, even if they are fascinated anyway. A perfect disappearing act, the real transforming into fiction. Now she lives her disgraceful retirement in the remote world of a cartoon, but reality will haunt her conscience forever. Added some more user submissions to worker degeneration. We have to stop here and talk about this. There is an entire page dedicated to Grace's guilt. We are told that her story became an urban legend and she lives her disgraceful retirement in the remote world of a cartoon. I don't believe any of this is literal. I think that Grace witnessed what was going on with Amber, never really did anything about it, and disappeared, never engaging with it again. She lives her retirement inside of a cartoon because the only way people can see her is through 3D Whisker. What's interesting is that this might mean that everyone else on the island is a known figure at this point. As I've been working on this video, I've been going back and forth as to the identity of the person that wrote the Computer Philosophy Windows page. I said before that it was Holland, and I do still kind of think that, but part of me wonders if it could be Grace instead. That page certainly feels like it was written by someone with a lot of guilt. Let me know what you guys think. Moving on with the page, we have more updates. Added an avalanche of screenshots to strange faces. I can't believe people are walking to the bathroom at night and seeing these things. Making this website has convinced me to never run 3D Whisker after bedtime. Thank you, P. Lawler. No sounds, no faces, wrong on both counts. Falling behind on emails. Sorry everybody, but pray for my brother, because he's been having a hard time lately. He's in the hospital now. Sometimes you've been broken in ways that don't hit you until decades later. I expect my turn to come soon. When that day comes, my brother will be alive to support me, but for now, let's go. So it appears that 3D Whisker can sometimes show strange faces that look out at the observer. That is certainly absolutely horrifying. I panic thinking about that when I'm working alone in my room here at night. I just love these little unexpected lore drops though, they're all so creepy. We also learned that the person that runs this site has a brother that appears to be in some sort of medical or emotional crisis. Our poster says that he expects his turn to come soon. If we're going with the idea that all these people are people in the simulation, then it might be Joe that's in charge of this website. That is a massive stretch, but it could work. Our next scene is really unnerving to me. We see Amber sitting on the bench while Pat and Rebecca kind of clip into each other. I think most of us have a good idea of what this represents. I believe that Pat and Rebecca were in a sexual, romantic relationship, and that they may have been intimate in front of Amber, which is something that sometimes happens in abusive relationships. I think that Rebecca was aware of the abuse that Amber was going through, but was still infatuated with Pat for some reason. I also think that the two are still together and running the discovery boards. Our next look at Inside 3D Whisker contains what is, to me, the most outstated horror of this entire project. Let's talk about the PJR pin. The PJR pin is one of 3D Whisker's first popular sightings. The letters PJR stand for Pat, Joe, and Rebecca, 3 characters on the island. When these 3 adults approach Amber in the following formation, facing her, it's called a PJR pin. Credit to P. Lawler for the icons. Amber is in the center of the formation. The PJR pin isn't complete unless all 3 adults are close enough to prevent Amber from moving, or in other words, to pin her in place. This is a very strict and specific requirement that is not met often. Formations in this particular shape are uncommon between any 4 characters. When they do form, they're spontaneous and brief. They'll usually reorganize themselves into more stable circles, or rather diamonds, like this. Why is the PJR pin significant? According to the stories, it triggers the following sequence of events. 1. All 4 characters disappear instantaneously. 2. The world is replaced with darkness. 3. In that darkness appears a photograph of a child in clothes that resemble Amber's pink stripes. She is sometimes injured, sometimes not. 4. An audio clip of a young woman screams, or multiple screams, play from the speakers. It is usually interpreted as Amber's voice, but sometimes as the voice of an off-camera witness. 5. The world reappears. Pat, Joe, Rebecca, and Amber reappear at the front door of the house one by one. Amber is the last to appear. No evidence of the event remains. Most accounts miss the first 3 steps in the sequence. It's only when they hear the screams that they start paying attention to what's happening on the screen. 3D Whisker doesn't officially play audio, but many stories report sounds. They usually describe very loud or very quiet sounds like screams or whispers, with little in between. We have a page just for whisper-related sightings, most involving Amber's pleas for help. Much pride is taken in the skill of recognizing these whispers as quickly as possible, since they often precede other events for which screenshots are desirable. No whispers precedes the PJR pin, unfortunately. Photographs are also a common theme in these sightings. 3D Whisker appears to have a heavy preoccupation with a real world, and in particular with real human bodies from living and healthy to mangled or emaciated or dead. In this case, even when Amber doesn't display any physical injuries, her transformation into a human body is often interpreted as an act of violence itself. In general, any movement between fiction and reality in either direction is treated with an undertone of terror. Descriptions of the photo vary. It may be that people are seeing the same photo and remembering it differently. It's not hard to believe that a disturbing and sudden scream is shocking people into seeing and remembering injuries that aren't there, but it's also possible that 3D Whisker is displaying different photos of the same girl at varying levels of injury, perhaps dependent on the context of the simulation, as Amber's plight has been shown to progress in severity over time. Who was the girl in the photo? Until we have a legitimate screenshot, we have little to go on, and this is one that has proven challenging to capture. G key. So to recap, all of the adults pin Amber in place, the screen goes black, screaming is heard, and a real photograph of a girl dressed like Amber is shown in various states of injury. I believe what we are seeing here is a representation of real-life Amber's death. I think that Amber was killed by Pat, and maybe Rebecca and Joe were there as well. This is where I have to introduce an aspect of my theory that might sound a little cliche, that being Amber's ghost. Specifically, I think that the 3D Workers Island program is essentially Amber's ghost. I think we are seeing her spirit attempting to tell the world her story. Let's look at some of the evidence to support this. The first being that there is clearly something supernatural going on with the program. It seems to completely entrance the people who watch it. There are many stories of people watching it at night or putting it on dozens of screens. People have never even heard of it, are immediately hooked, and can't keep their eyes off of it. As we've seen from the few scenes we've got to witness, there aren't really any high-octane thrills going on in 3D Whisker. There really seems to be no logical reason for people to get this sucked into it. Another oddity with 3D Whisker is that everyone seems to naturally agree that their favorite character is Amber, and any opinion to the contrary is met with hostility. If Amber's spirit really is inside the program, wouldn't it make sense that she would use this power to make sure that those who watch are completely obsessed with her, receiving the love that she never got when she was alive? I view this situation as being something like Samara or Sadako from The Ring. Sadako dies and her rage and agony is burned onto a VHS tape which becomes cursed. Her agony is transformed into media that can be viewed by others, and I think this is what happened to Amber. She was killed by Pat, and now she is 3D Whisker. Consider the fact that no one knows where the program came from. It really seems like it just showed up one day. Also, consider the fact that no one seems to know how the AI works or just how complicated it even is. You'd think that any program made in the late 90s would be pretty easy to crack, but no one can even agree to what level of complexity this AI even has. It's because it isn't an artificial intelligence, it's Amber. Despite what Pat and Rebecca say, there definitely is something about the program that seems to reveal itself to certain people that watch it, these horrifying events. I actually believe Pat when she says that she has never once seen any of the scary things that anyone else has reported. Even though she watches it constantly, I don't think she's seen them. But that begs the question, why hasn't she seen them? You'd think that someone who spends all their time staring at their multiple screens of 3D Whisker would have seen something by now. She hasn't seen anything because Amber doesn't want to show her anything. She has no reason to open up to the person who abused and then killed her. This is partially why I think the instant message conversation could be Pat talking to someone else. The user, Miss Toothpaste, which literally has the name Pat in it by the way, talks about showing the screensaver to their cousin. She mentions that the screen will freeze, but that this is when it is hiding things from the user. No one else seems to have reported this phenomenon though. It looks like it's unique to Miss Toothpaste. I think these freezes are when Amber would be showing something more personal to someone, but she stops herself from showing it to Pat. Pat also mentions that the program seems to be pretty taxing on the computer it runs on, but it can also run on pretty much every computer, which is a strange detail to add. Unless Pat keeps seeing 3D Whisker freeze on all of her computers. She attributes this freezing to the computer not being able to handle the program rather than Amber hiding from her. Another piece of evidence of there being something paranormal going on are the images of Amber that are seen after the PJR pin. Think about it. Who would even have images of a tortured and abused Amber? Realistically, just the people on the island, but we aren't shown any evidence of anyone ever taking any pictures. Perhaps what we are seeing are images projected from Amber's mind. We are seeing her show herself to the user by showing them the evidence of her abuse. This again is something that Sadako does in The Ring. She projects her mental images onto the physical VHS to show those images to people. We are told that Amber appears in various stages of abuse throughout the images. She is the only one who would know exactly what she looked like during those stages. We are told we can hear Amber's screams or the screams of multiple people coming through the speakers, but Pat is certain that 3D Whisker can't play sound. While I'm sure the program shows no capabilities of being able to produce sound, the spirit of Amber isn't quite bound by those rules and plays the sound anyways. I think the multiple screams are from when Amber was killed by Pat, and I think the other adults may have been present and Amber's death wasn't exactly planned. I think Pat may have set out to physically abuse Amber like usual, but things got out of hand and she ended up dying. The screams are those of confusion and frustration from those who witnessed it. After the pin, the world seems to reset and everyone acts like everything is normal. Amber is back in the world like nothing happened. I think this is the screensaver resetting itself. Amber has no recollection past the real-life PJR pin that led to her murder. Also, consider the fact that the boards say that the act of her turning into a human is an act of violence in and of itself. The people who view 3D Whisker are so in tune to what Amber is going through that the mere fact that she might be a real person is cause for concern because her life was pure suffering. Okay. So now that I've laid out my theory that Amber is 3D Whisker, let's move on to the rest of this story. We're getting very close to the end now, just a little bit more to go. Our next scene is interesting. We see a laptop on the table and Rebecca, Holland, Grace, and Joe stand around before Holland appears to throw a tantrum and the lawnmower is nearby. One common reading of this scene is that the adults are trying to get Holland to mow the lawn, but she throws a fit and the adults don't seem to know what to do. Mowing the lawn is something that we have seen Amber do before, so why do they want Holland to do it? Why is it her responsibility? I think it's because Amber is dead at this point. The adults want Pat's other child to fill the same role that Amber did, but Holland refuses. Whether this really is just a worker role or potentially the role of a victim, I'm not sure. Another reading that I have of this scene is that this is the aftermath of Amber's murder. Pat is still in the house with her body and everyone else stands outside and waits. We haven't really seen Grace interact with a group like this, which makes me think that they're talking about something important. Maybe they've told them that Amber is gone. The fit that Holland throws could either be about having to do the work now that Amber is gone, or her genuine grief over losing her sister. Either way, there isn't much more to say about this. Next up, we have the last of the discovery boards, and I'm going to go through them at a little slower of a pace this time. It's getting worse and worse. The more I watch, the more I notice, the more I understand, the more bold it becomes with the things it shows me. Every time I come to some new revelation, the screensaver shows me more. But most other people don't see these things. And if I have someone in the room with me, they don't happen. Are you telling me P. Lawler, with the 10 billion hours she's been watching 3D Whisker, hasn't seen any of these things? Getting dangerous in here, lol. Again, it seems like there's a sentient entity inside of 3D Whisker. How else would it only show itself to reality priests when they are the only person in the room? Again, the reason Pat hasn't seen these things is because Amber has no reason to reveal herself to her abuser. In fact, confirming that she still exists as this entity would be a victory for Pat. She now gets to watch her daughter caught in the same loop, reliving the same abuse over and over again. I wonder if her insistence that the creepy stuff isn't real comes from her frustration. What comes next is a really important piece of the puzzle. I would consider it to be the last big piece of evidence that makes this whole thing come together. Good kid. Pat Lawler is a criminal. I have family who used to live down the street from her. Nobody in their right mind would trust Pat Lawler. Pat Lawler shouldn't be allowed to run a 3D Workers Island fan website. She should be in prison. Anyone who wants details is free to message me. I'm GoodKid85 on AIM. And he's banned. That was fast. P. Lawler is always online. She reads every post the second you submit it. You cannot evade her. So it appears that Good Kid knows what Pat has done, saying she should be in jail. This is another big swing, but I think it's one that pulls a lot of this theory together. I think that Good Kid is Grace. Now, there are a couple issues with this theory, and I want to get those out of the way. The first is that they state that they have family who used to live down the street from her. I think this is either a lie, or Grace's interaction with the Lawler family was limited to when she was visiting her family that lived next door to her. It could also just be a cover-up to hide her identity. The other tricky bit of information is the other user referring to Good Kid as he. For one, I think the other user could just be assuming that Good Kid is a boy for some reason. But the other bit of information that makes me believe that Good Kid is a girl is that they say they were in detention for multiple dress code violations. This was the 90s, presumably in the US, and the dress code at public schools has pretty consistently only really applied and was made for girls. They're really the only ones that ever get punished for violating it. So I'm pretty convinced that Good Kid is Grace. And this might be a stretch, but I also think that Grace is Rebecca's daughter and potentially Joe's daughter as well. Grace could be a child of divorce with either her dad or her mom living down the street from Pat. That is the family that she says lives near them. Maybe she spends most of her time with her mom. One of the stranger things that Good Kid says in their anecdote about being in detention is the specific mention of their sweet angelic mommy. I believe this was edited after the fact. We know that Pat has the ability to change things that people have posted. She was able to remove a link earlier to prevent anyone from accessing the Inside 3D Whisker site. I think that Grace may have referred to her mother, Rebecca, as something less than nice, and Pat changed it to sweet angelic mommy. This also fits with the romantic connection between the two. Also notice the signature at the end of Good Kid's messages. It reads, "Forgive me, I don't know anything, I'm just a 14-year-old teenage kid." This sounds like something Pat put in after the fact, discrediting her after everything she posts in order to keep the truth from coming out. These edits also could have been done by Singer, as they handle the technical side of the website, but I believe Singer is Rebecca, so it's pretty much the same thing. I believe Grace was raised around the Lawler family. I think her parents divorced and her mom, Rebecca, fell for Pat. This led to her witnessing a lot of the abuse that Amber went through. Despite this, she never once said or did anything, and as I said earlier, the Window Philosophy website could have been made by her to come to terms with her guilt. I think this guilt may have manifested as a sort of self-hatred as well, and that's why there's an entire page dedicated to Grace's guilt on the Inside 3D Whisker website. One of the more confusing elements of the story that ends up being weirdly important is Good Kid's creation of kudalakune, a fictional disease that deals with the loss of skin. We are told that this is a disease where someone develops skin gaps, which turn into skin islands, which eventually completely recede into something called the recession of the islands. What is interesting is that this disease can actually be found in a story that the creator of 3D Workers Island, Tony Domenico, wrote a few years back called Good Sky. Most people seem to treat this as a cool little Easter egg and nothing more, but I could not get this story out of my head for one reason, that being that Good Kid says she invented kudalakune. It's not like she read this story and put it in her own works. She says that she made it up and got in trouble for putting it into her assignments at school. I think that Grace wrote Good Sky. I think that in the universe of 3D Whisker, we are supposed to believe that Good Sky is something that she wrote. Her username Good Kid is also very similar to Good Sky. So I'm going to read this entire story because I think it's really cool. I'll include a timestamp if you don't want to hear the entire thing, but I think it's really important to understanding Grace. Remember, this isn't just a random story. This is something that Grace, the witness to Amber's horrific abuse, is writing, and I think that trauma shines through.
When I was Good Sky, I baked sweet layered desserts with mommy within the safety of a hotbox. A hotbox is a box that excites with fire, like an oven or a heated home, with intent that the application of heat might make its contents right and happy to be adored. The cake I baked with mommy was, in this way, right with taste as to be adored by the tongue. She told me what to do with a smile. I did it all. She hugged me and said, "You did it." And I struck into its matrix of bound ingredients, sugar and its soldiers of texture, layer on layer. I ate 3 slices before the taste hung to room temperature. In this way, I became full of the joy that makes one lovable to another. Mommy had since left the room, and I went for her. She was fixing the house with her cleaning tools. I asked for what occasion. "Your father is coming home in some hours," she told me. "We should be ready for that." She picked up the newspaper from a table and trashed it. "The war is over," said the headline from above the brim of the can. The land was beginning to quake from the shores. Mommy frowned. "I think your father saw bad things. Don't ask about those." When time came, Daddy arrived in a wheelchair with a book on his lap. We welcomed him to no reaction. He read over his legs for 10 minutes before speaking to us. Mommy prepared him a slice of cake on a paper plate. He rejected it and shouted, "Sedatives, what are you trying to do?" "Food is the second of the pleasures," Mommy said. "It satisfies the growing desire. The first of the pleasures will come later." "I desire none of the 4 pleasures as they are traditionally described," Daddy said. "They approve of sleep and lead us to the phrase, sleep and the pleasures, but they may be altered." He went on, "The first, physical intimacy, may be rearranged as physical pain. The second, food, as nausea or cannibalism. The third, music, as dissonance. The fourth, color, as one of the suppressed colors, blue or gray. I will take only those given variations, or namely, the pains." "It's as they warned," Mommy said. "You've been frostbitten by war, the art of pain. No, but I won't accept it. Forget all you've seen, and we will return from the point where we strayed from love to love." "You're acting stubborn and ignorant," Daddy said. "Collective absence of pain can't eliminate its existence. As they say, the palette is drawn to the canvas." "I've heard it all," Mommy said. "The returning soldiers have begun turning away from the pleasures, becoming drivers of the pains, and all resulting from that absurd notion. But tell me you have not truly followed them yet, and we can settle." "I have followed them to the brink," he replied, "and so will this family, in adding weight to my support. Today we will submit to practice." He called me over. "Come, good Sky." I walked to him, and he put me on his lap. "I will tell you a story." He told me about his distance through the forest of scared trees, 5 years into the war. Henceforth established in strength to judges, he left with a handful of others. They stopped at a spacious, fenced-in lumber mill in the center of the forest. A cloud of smoke rose from behind the fence into the sky. A man came out and shook their hands in welcome. Inside, piles of wood were burned in a corner like byproducts. Many shelters were scattered and skinny men lied under them. These people were, as Daddy accounted, prisoners of war. He met one of them, a man with a skin condition recently classified as kurlakune. It amounts to an intense surface sensitivity caused by regions of missing skin layers. This prisoner was of particular interest to the man running the lumber mill. He was forced into a hut as the sun set each day, where his sensitive skin would be attacked with palms and fingernails until morning. The dead were thrown into the fire. They, too, were byproducts of a much more important process. "In the same way," Daddy said, "I'm going to wake you up, good Sky. You are my daughter, and you deserve it most." He pulled me to his chest and slid a knife out from between the pages of his book. Mommy screamed before I did. They struggled for a moment, but Daddy had his leverage. He held my arm to the wall and gazed at my hand. "A delicate choice," he said, but soon went for the ring finger. He took the knife to it. Mommy tried again to pull him off, but he was strengthened by combat. Daddy sawed through my entire finger. First came a barking of the knuckle, loose skin traveling with the blade. Then a thin scrape of sting of departure as it ripped with the stroke. Bone gave to the toss like timber to the sawtooth. He drew me into his sway of the work. I screamed up. A feedback of blood came over the wall and spat from the tongue of the knife. Mommy was crying on the other side of the room where I could no longer see her. What now reads predictably to me, I fainted upon seeing blood. I woke up on my bed beside the window. It was snowing outside of my hotbox and the ground was covered. Days like these used to assure me I was real and lovable. Things that exist, children of the pleasures, have freedom to be idle and nevertheless continue to be real. The people outside my window, rather, were moving, rubbing their hands together and shaking. Children were begging their fathers to allow them back inside. I touched the window with my hand and lost some heat. On that note, I saw that my ring finger was gone and replaced by bandages. Panic fell through me. Mommy talked to Daddy across the house. She made monotonous noises. Daddy got up and started to walk. "Good Sky, wake up," Daddy said. "Check this weather." I jumped out of bed and locked my door. There were no options for hiding, but my eyes went back to the window. The glass again absorbed the love from my hands when I touched it. I felt the bandage and considered Mommy. Daddy knocked on the door. "Good Sky, it's time to wake up again," he said. He turned the knob. "Unlock this." I opened the window and jumped outside. My skin poked out, propped by needles, touching the snow that buried me around. My love left and scattered through the veins of the blanket into the neighborhood. After I emerged, I saw the children across the road again. I shivered in my thin clothes and turned around. Daddy called again from the house. I stepped up barefoot and ran far through the snow. With enough time, I began to tire and hurt, so I stopped by a tree and sat. A chill came and shook the branches. I tried to hug myself around the torso. No warmth. I felt overwhelmed and cried into my hands. Footsteps approached my lap. I looked up from my hands and saw a girl stopped above me. "Hello," she said. "I'm really sorry that you aren't happy." No, I said, looking down again as I talked. "Please don't say that. Stay away." "I know what you're feeling," she said, "but things are different now. Are you unhappy because of your mommy too?" I nodded and she helped me up. She brought me to her house and introduced herself. Her name was Pars English. "My mommy abandoned me," she said. "I have a condition, and because of that condition, I feel pain all the time." It made her feel bad, and so she left. "What's the condition?" I asked. She lifted her shirt halfway, squinting from the pain. All across her torso, there were gaps of missing skin. Kudalakune, I said. She nodded. Some of the windows were broken, and the cold came into the house. I looked outside. Those children out there, I said. Do their daddies talk about the pains too? This is why some children are forced outside into the cold, Pars said. The drivers of the pains are raising them now. I remained at Pars English's house for a very long time. We slept in the same bed and tried to stay animate. There was only a little bit of food left, and it disappeared quickly. We became small with time, and would hope to find somebody generous in the neighborhood, but nobody wanted to have starving children on their mind. They shut the door on us. Our closest neighbor would give me looks now and again. I always felt hopeful for a moment, but in the end, she would just close her eyes and turn away. That's my aunt, Pars said after I brought it up. It would be wrong for her to love somebody like me. She's what they call a true lover of the pleasures, and I believe she deserves our respect for that. Pars eventually lost her mobility, as Kudalakune tends to grow in these circumstances. Even the bed upset the gaps on her back. The job of gathering food fell on me, and I came regularly to bring her share and talk. What did your daddy say about the pain? She asked. To be honest, I still don't understand what they mean, and with these recent events I've grown in interest. He gave examples, I said, but they were all lack of things, and not worth listing as things, so I don't know. I suppose for the physical pleasure he talked about physical pain, and for the food pleasure he talked about being sick. I nodded. Yes, I said. She went on. I think I would much rather be a lover of the pleasures than a lover of the pains. I know what you mean by lack of things, and I see now why the pleasures are so often tied to warmth, since warmth is having rather than a lacking of something. Pars was about to say more, but somebody knocked on the front door. I went to see who it was, but nobody was around by the time I arrived. I looked to the front steps and found a tall cake in the open. I shivered as I picked it up, scanning again that nobody was around. It was not one of Mommy's cakes, but it looked good and I was delighted to have it. I took the cake inside and placed it on the table. There was a note under it reading, I'm sorry, and signed by Auntie. I cut a piece for myself and ate. In eating a treat, one wishes to become it. I likewise felt centered to the growing desire attributed so famously to food and the other lesser growing pleasures. After 3 slices, filled and rekindled, I went to tell Pars about the news. Just before I could say a word, she spoke. Good, Sky, she said. She turned her body to me and winced before coming back to a smile. I think I understand the pains. I let her talk. It is as you said, she began. The core of pleasure is having, or ownership. Warmth travels from one to another, as in a kind of transference. She continued. Consider what wills our neighbors to ignore us. Our pain, by interaction, might become theirs. With the notion of transference, warmth describes pain just as well as it describes pleasure. As she talked, I looked at her gaps. They delayered her entire body below the neck. She leaned over the bedside, wincing again as she contacted the sheets. There's something more. You've heard of blue and gray, right? Pars asked. She picked up a painted block of wood from under the bed. Some call them colors, others are against calling them anything at all, and the rest claim never to have seen them before. She held up the block. It looked like part of the sky. Blue and gray exist, she said. They are part of a palette somewhere. There is an expression that, inevitably, the palette is drawn to the canvas. In other words, by law of nature, this block of wood has to exist. It probably can't be prevented. I decided to leave the room when our conversation ended. Notably, I did not tell her about the cake. She handed me the block of wood, and I stared at it for a very long time. Something inspired me. Instead of giving Pars a piece of the cake, I decided to eat the rest of it myself. When time came to feed her, I found a rotten meal beside a neighbor's house. She smiled at this meal, no regard for its appearance, and ate it. I watched her vomit. The next meal was similar, and in this way, I kept her sick. Her sickness excited the Kudalakune, which came up the neck and ruined her face. The hair fell from her head. In this way, I kept her ugly. Her aunt continued to bake wonderful cakes and leave them by the door. I hope you are okay, Pars, they would say. I ate them myself, and they made me very happy and warm. After I finished eating, I walked into the bedroom. Pars could neither move nor open her mouth to talk. I held the blue block in my hand, waved it before her eyes, and skimmed a corner along one of her skin gaps. She tensed, but since she couldn't move, I heard nothing. I don't know what I'm doing, I said, walking to a window. I poked the broken glass and pulled back. But I think you might get it. Your family's been through a lot of pain, and mine hasn't. I took notice of my 4-fingered hand and hid it away. I just want to be close to somebody, I said. The next day, the aunt knocked again. I arrived at the door before she had time to leave. We locked eyes and went our ways. The note under the chest said, I still love you, Pars. I felt pain in my chest. I checked on Pars. She was dead. A draft came from the broken window and brushed me. There was snow again. I turned and watched the flakes land and make piles on the floor inside the house. I dragged her body into the kitchen and laid her on the tabletop. The cake was still whole, and I decided to take it outside for somebody else to eat. None of the kitchen knives were alike with Daddy's knife. I picked one of them and sliced Pars into pieces. I was used to doing this with food. Her surface was without skin. The taste was strongly painful to my tongue, and it took will to swallow. I gasped, and teared in my eyes. I ate 3 slices before the taste rose to room temperature. In this way, I became full of the pain that makes one invisible to another. and I thereby understood that kind of warmth an unlovable girl could obtain. With the knowledge that I could never return home, I left and looked at the gray sky.
So I'd love to do a full analysis on this someday because it's really neat and has a lot going on, but let's just look at how it might apply to Grace and Amber. We have a story where Good Sky is damaged by her father and finds another girl named Pars that has been abandoned by her mom and is suffering from Kulakune. She tries to take care of Pars, but is greedy in eating the food that they find, which leads to Pars dying and Good Sky being left with the guilt of her death. Sound familiar? I think Grace is writing this as a way to express her guilt and trauma. In fact, I think most of what we have seen so far has been a way for her to deal with that guilt. The more I think about it, the more I become convinced that the internet philosophy page was actually written by Grace. She was the one who was afraid to look into the windows of Amber's life. That page contains an image of a window that looks out into a blue sky. You could call it a good sky. That might be a bit of a stretch, but honestly, any theory is a massive stretch at this point. But anyways, let's move on to our next scene on the island. This one is pretty simple. We see Pat on her laptop before she disappears behind the house. Again, she hides herself from the sight of the viewer, hiding her crimes. After this, we get a picture of the Earth inside a star. The star flips around, revealing the door to the house on the other side, before flipping back to the Earth. I believe this is again telling us that the world of 3D Whisker and the real world are two sides of the same coin. They are directly related. Amber's abuse was real. Next, we have more of the discovery pages. This time they're talking about worker degeneration. Update 424.99. I've decided to stop posting new submissions to this page. This is one of the most well-documented sightings, and at this point I'm receiving mostly redundant info. Thanks for everything you've sent in. Worker degeneration is something akin to injury or damage. This damage is associated with an active entity, which 3D Whisker calls a worker, hence the name of this page. It's not clear to me how this term came about. It wasn't invented by 3D Whisker's authors, yet it implies a bit of knowledge about the Screensaver's internals, that the injury is associated in some fundamental way with the underlying worker concept. This is especially strange since the only documented case of worker degeneration are tied to one character, that being Amber. Therefore, it seems premature to generalize this term to such an extent, but I'll use the established name. If you've ever seen a red amber, you've seen worker degeneration. This is an early stage. After this comes compression, and the results look like this. This red ball is seemingly inert. It doesn't move or interact with anything. But yes, the red ball is amber. This state has been interpreted as representing dehydration, malnutrition, and/or mutilation, and the many photographic sightings seem to confirm all those interpretations equally. But most of all, it's become associated with small muffled screaming and therefore with pain. It doesn't take long for this red ball to start shrinking and quieting down, until sooner or later it can't be seen or heard anymore. Amber will usually respawn from the house at some time after compression, even while the red ball is still visible. The program will eventually continue as usual. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Worker degeneration is Amber growing more and more injured and beaten down after all of the abuse, eventually dying. She becomes the red sphere, something that Pat called the red sphere of falseness. I think that she just doesn't acknowledge the death of her daughter. She pretends like Amber never existed. Now, if you're insane like me and 3D Workers Island has completely consumed your mind, you might be saying, Pat told us that she has two daughters. Clearly she isn't ignoring Amber. This is something that I thought about, but I think that the other daughter that Pat is referring to is Grace. I think that she and Rebecca are together now, and Grace is now Pat's child. Back to worker degeneration, we are told that this is one of the most common sightings in 3D Whisker. Again, everyone is seeing this except for Pat because Amber won't show her. Also consider the fact that this is referred to as worker degeneration, but really only ever happens to Amber. She's the only real worker on the island. As I was writing my script, I kept accidentally typing 3D Workers Island with an apostrophe. Instead of pluralizing worker, I wrote it like the island belonged to a single worker. And this probably wasn't intended at all, but I think that's actually pretty accurate to my reading of the story. Amber is the island. She is the worker, and this is her island. We get another count of worker degeneration from Falling into Asphalt. That is a name we heard before on the Internet Philosophy website. Falling into Asphalt tells us a story. Letting the screensaver go longer periods has unlocked something, and now I'm seeing all sorts of funny stuff like red amber. She goes in the house, comes back redder, goes behind the house, comes back redder again, comes back weird and slow, crawls around until pop, she's just a ball on the ground that everyone ignores, and that's that. Nathan Manfield kept the screensaver running all day and writes, I went away for 8 hours. When I got back, there was a bunch of red spheres scattered around and making noises. Altogether, it sounded like a chorus of dissonant humming. Now I'm wondering just how long my dog had to listen to that stuff. The next message is really fascinating because it says it's from Thomas, but I really think this is Amber speaking. Maybe she's just hijacking another user's account. This is what it says. How many of them are sitting at the bottom of the ocean? I just can't help but feel hopeless about everything. Nobody will ever help me, and I'll never help myself. I'm too afraid even to reach out. I'm not even writing this right now. This message exists only in my head. This whole website exists only in my head. 3D Workers Island? What is this? Would I really put this online? Would I really give anyone the slightest glimpse into my world? This is fake, this is false, and nobody will ever see. If Amber is 3D Whisker, then this could be her doubt regarding its creation. She knows no one will help her, and this website exists online only in her head. She asks if she really would put 3D Workers Island online. She thinks that no one will ever see it and that this is all fake, but we know that none of this is true. Our next scene is Grace standing at the edge of the island, looking out over the water. I see this as her removing herself from the rest of the group, going to her shameful retirement. This next section is something that I don't think I've seen anyone talk about. We see a bunch of colorful balls dropping onto the ground, and I think this is a screensaver. Near the beginning of the story, we were shown a listing for a screensaver that describes colorful shapes moving around the screen, and I think that's what we're seeing right now. But then the question is, why is this being shown to us, and why is this pretty much at the very end of the story? I think this goes back to something Pat wrote about 3D Whisker. There was a sense of ghostly transience, that none of it is really happening, and it can all vanish with the flick of a mouse. While Pat is describing the mechanics of a screensaver, the idea that it all goes away as soon as you do anything on your computer, this also sounds like how an abuser would think. She truly believes that everything she did to Amber, including her murder, can just be wiped away without another thought. And she is only reminded of it when she sits still for too long. So what does this have to do with the other screensaver? I believe this is showing us that whoever's eyes we're seeing this through, 3D Whisker isn't a screensaver for them. That is to say that 3D Whisker is the active state on their computer and in their mind. It is only when things are dormant that the program quits and we get the real screensaver. So while Pat sees Amber as something that is so easily wiped away, we know that it was always there, it was always present, and it couldn't have been forgotten about. In fact, I think we might be viewing this entire project through Grace's eyes. Maybe that's why we're able to see Good Kids comments even though they are a banned user. The last tiny portion of this experience is titled Recession of the Islands. It's another Kudalakune reference. We know that Grace was putting this into all of her schoolwork, and maybe she is the one who put this whole story together as well. Back on the island, we see 6 red balls sinking into the water. The balls that Amber carried around and seemed to be dumping into the ocean, the evidence of her death. Despite her trying to reach out through the program, she is unable to get her message across. Each red ball, each memento of her suffering, is eventually swallowed up by the sea and forgotten. We then zoom out from the island until it can't be seen anymore. Then, the screen splits into a view of 25 different views of the empty water, we get a red screen, and 3D Workers Island ends. As for the last 2 occurrences, I think that the zooming out until it is viewed on a bunch of different screens is symbolic of all the people watching the screensaver. They all stare at it, but they never see what Amber wants them to see. It's like there is no island there at all. No one is coming to save her. It's already too late for that. She's already gone. The red screen is identical to Good Kid's profile picture on the discovery boards. Maybe this is Grace's signature, letting us know that she was the one we've been following this entire time. Attempting to convey the guilt she feels over the murder and abuse of Amber, attempting to show us that Amber is in the screensaver, attempting to fix what cannot be fixed. 3D Workers Island is an absolute masterclass of cryptic storytelling. While I may have been able to hopefully put together a somewhat coherent theory about it, I could be completely wrong. Most people seem to agree that this is a story about abuse. I think that a lot of people put that together and then just find all of the thematic connections and call it a day. And I think that's a totally valid way to read this. There are a few other videos about this that discuss the abuse themes in really interesting and powerful ways. But I want to try to put together some sort of narrative explanation because I couldn't find a satisfying way to tie all of the story threads together. And I think I know why I couldn't find something to tie it all together back then. It's because it turns out it's really difficult to do and you second guess yourself all the time. You have to rewrite your script over and over and over again. And then you spend 2.5 hours recording that video at night and your voice starts to get hoarse and you get all scared and creeped out. But I hope this video can prompt some more discussion on this project as I think it's highly underrated in the online horror community. It unfortunately has to kind of live in the shadow of Petscop, but despite this, I think that 3D Workers Island manages to capture that same eerie, dark, uncomfortable tone that makes Petscop so great, and I think the narrative here is really engaging. So please check this out yourself if you haven't yet. It's a really great experience and I would love to hear your guys' theories as to what might be going on here. Something that I've come to realize as I make more videos is that there's always a chance that you might pick up on something that no one else has yet. I used to think that a lot of these internet mysteries have been done to death, so there was nothing new I could add to the conversation, but I don't think that's true anymore. I mean, a couple months back, someone solved the mystery of a character's name in Five Nights at Freddy's that no one had been able to answer beforehand, and I'm telling you right now, if someone in the year 2025 can come up with a new angle and theory for Five Nights at Freddy's, which is like 75% of this platform at this point, you can come up with a new theory for anything. So these were my thoughts on 3D Workers Island, a project that I find endlessly fascinating and incredibly captivating. But hey, that's just sorry about that, I coughed there. I can't even remember what I was going to say. It probably wasn't important. Thank you guys so much as always for watching. This ended up being a much harder video to write than I initially thought. I just kept going back and forth on so many different theories, which I think shows in the script. Sorry if there are some contradictions in this video. My brain was just completely fried by the end of this. If you haven't subscribed yet, then please do. I'm trying to reach 100,000 subscribers by the end of 2025, and I can use all the help I can get. If you'd like to support me further, then consider becoming a channel member for just $3 a month. Channel members get early access to all my videos, access to the occasional exclusive video, access to my Discord, and access to my members-only book club. Link in the description. A massive thank you to all my gold tier members: Amanda Mapes, Lucas Fernando, Chris Lamb, Ezra, Silent Trails, Blue Radio Media, Tyler the Leopard, Vix Corner, Miss Joy 16, Coco Boco, Cherry Shark, Moonson Blog, Starlight Pink, Jackson Moore, Amanda Castillon, Lexi, Arcade Link Author, B, The Official Gar, Wybab Flow, Hi, Sassos, Apodapos, Semra, Laura Gunza, Classic Pats Games Plus, Miranda M, Hexmaniac Rafa, Heat O'Brien, Ben Best, Mary Elizabeth, The Next M, Digital Fox, Issa, Uton, Sherpert, Emilio Nomura, Temple, Ellie, Jupiter Rainstorms, Junie, Maddie, Alice Hale, Vesper, Jess, Miley Bop, Abigail Wagner, Centauri Productions, Canadine, Emma Gees, Red, Moss, My S, Site 42, Where I Like Bread, Alicia, Chipsa, Out of the Fandom, Getty Hirsch, Maddie, FM, Basil, Robstar 3112, Freddie and Foxy, Blair Reverse, Liminal Lake, Flora Pause, Jojo, Yum the Epic, Spirit Hotline, Furbish, GDDC, Ketcher Elizabeth, Mayfield, Shruby, Lich or Something, Jazz, Homie Gaming, Sue, Bundle of Sticks, and Danny. Thank you guys all so much for supporting me. I've just been trying to kind of like keep my head down and make as much content as possible for you guys. I saw someone on Reddit that was really mad that I keep talking about internet horror, and I promise there'll be more horror literature stuff and SCP stuff coming soon. I've got mad ADHD, so when my brain kind of hyper focuses on something, that it's hard to let it go, and that's why I've been on such an internet horror kick as of late. But thanks again to everyone for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya. Take me up again, let me see the stars. Is there life on Mars? 'Cause I've run out of luck here on Earth. I'm a wanderer. Another trip around the sun makes these memories flood, and I could wash it down with the atmosphere. You're cool blue and crystal clear. I'm an astronaut flying above, but can't fall in love. Floating alone, brave enough to see the cosmos, too scared to say hello. And I know one day I'll be gold